I want to give our introduction on Jim. He's a flight director over at the Challenger Learning Center in Bangor, Maine. And Jim has been doing that since about 2013, right?
Yep.
And before that, he was a research associate in the School of Marine Sciences at the University of Maine. He holds a bachelor's of science and a master's in science and biological oceanography. And his previous jobs have included oceanography, chemistry instructor, and fisheries researcher at the NOAA. So without any further ado, I'm going to let you take it away. Thank you so much for being here with us, Jim.
Well, you're very welcome. I'm glad to be here and share some information. I was, let me see here. Did I lose my screen here? Ah, no. Okay, that actually popped up a little before I wanted it to. There we go. Anyway, I was asked to come in here and talk to you today a little bit about just what it's like in space. I think you've been hearing quite a bit about the one particular set of experiments that uses the mice grown down in Jackson Lab. There's all types of other experiments and science that goes on up in the space station up there. And I've had the honor to get to know a couple of astronauts, usually pretty amazing people. And they spend a lot of time after they come back, when they're not in space, going around and talking to different groups. And over and over and over, they have to answer the question about what's it like? What is it like to go up there to space? So instead of concentrating on one set of experiments, I just thought I would cover a little bit of information in general about what it's like to go to space these days. So to begin with, you're going to start off with a truly amazing ride. They spend a lot of time preparing astronauts for this, but then when you talk to them about it, you see their faces just light up. What it's like to actually get aboard a rocket and blast off and spend a few minutes, you know, under heavy G's, heavy gravitational force, getting up through the atmosphere. For the last 9 years, all astronauts have left on the Russian space program. Our space shuttles retired back in 2011. So the only way to get to space is to fly with the Russians, because the United States and Russia cooperate quite a bit in space research. So they go to Kazakhstan, get aboard this Soyuz rocket that you see, and go to space for a while. And then when they come back down, these capsules land back on the ground, back in the deserts of Kazakhstan. So that's what they've done for the last 9 years. But just a few months ago, we finally had another flight go from the United States. The company called SPACEX has developed a rocket and a capsule that's very advanced compared to the old Russian ones. The Russians are very reliable, but kind of old-fashioned, certainly compared to these big capsules, which have room for 6 people inside. And they look so clean and neat inside that you almost think it just has to be a Disney ride instead of a real capsule. And when these come back down, they splash down in the ocean. So they're recovered out at sea. So it's very good to have our own method of getting to space, launching and returning back to the United States again. So where do you go if you go to space? But the only place astronauts go at the moment is the International Space Station. It's called an International Space Station because it's been built by 15 countries. It took a lot of flights in the space shuttles, hauling big pieces up, and then they were assembled up in space. Over 11 years, they had 42 different flights hauling the equipment up there to put this thing together. And it's almost coming up on November 2nd, will be the 20-year anniversary of having people continuously operating up there. Many people don't even know that a space station is actually up in space, about 250 miles up. And again, on November 22nd, that means there'll be people continuously in space for 20 years. Now, this space station is also bigger than people might think. Sometimes when they picture people up in space, they picture the little capsules from the Apollo era or something back when we were just really getting started. But this thing is huge. If you brought the space station back down to Earth, it'd cover an entire football field, including the end zones. It weighs right around 1 million pounds. And the room inside altogether is like the inside of a 5-bedroom house. although it's really laid out in one long tube. So when you come out of your capsule after your trip up there, you're going to bump into some other people. Usually there's about 6 people who work on the space station. Sometimes there's only 3, and sometimes during a crew change, there might be 9 people aboard for just a few days, but generally there's 6 people up there. To date, there have been 241 people who have lived and worked aboard this International Space Station, and so far they've come from 19 different countries. Of course, I hope local people here realize that we have 2 astronauts from Maine. Jessica Meir is from Caribou, Maine. She's really a marine biologist interested in the physiology of animals. And she just went up last September, I believe, for the first time. Chris Cassidy has been up there on his 3rd mission, and he is scheduled to come back today. Just yesterday, he had an official handover of the station. He's been the commander of the station for the last 6 months, and he officially handed over command to the new Russian commander who went up there. He is going to get in his capsule, and they'll close the door about 7 o'clock tonight, and he'll come back down overnight on the 3-hour ride back down to Kazakhstan again. So again, though, what is it like in space? Well, it's different when you talk to them. You have to do a lot of the same things, but everything is a little bit different in space. We can start off just thinking about eating. Think about how you eat down here. Well, you just go to the grocery store, you buy food, you have a huge choice of food, and then you would cook it on your stove. You might have a big pot of water to boil a lot of noodles, something like that. But up in space, there's no grocery stores. They don't have any normal stove like we have here. They have small food heaters, and the water supply is very limited. And of course, without gravity, you can't just set plates down, put your food on the plate, cut things up with a knife, and eat it with a fork. It's all a little different up there. They do have a very limited ability to grow some food. They have 3 different chambers up there now where they're growing plants in space. They're all grown hydroponically, which means without soil. And most of this is still experimental. Sometimes on special days like Thanksgiving, they let them actually eat some of the fresh food that they've grown up there. But most of the time, they're all eating prepared foods, which are shipped up every few months. And they all come in these little bags. There's generally 2 types. Some of them look a lot like meals ready to eat, little sort of light gray bags, and others are freeze-dried containers. But they also have to be very careful about what they eat because they can't let little crumbs get all over the space station. Without any gravity, the food floats around and the crumbs would float around and just get all over everything and get in the equipment. So I've got a quick video here to run featuring our Jessica Meir.
Tonight we thought we would show you a little bit about some meal prep, what we do for meals on board the space station. How do we prepare them? So the answer is we have a great variety of food up here.
2 different general types of food, thermostabilized food in these green packets that's very similar to military MREs or meals ready to eat. And then we also have freeze-dried food.
So all of the water content has been sucked out. This is just basic asparagus, so we need to add the water back in. We want to make sure all that water is mixing in, and then we usually put it here inside the food warmer.
And then we have refrigerated space here. They've been nice enough to allow us to use these just for food. All right.
Dinner
Dinner
time.
table.
Turkish fish stew. I have butternut squash.
All right. I'm having I have rice with butter, some lentil soup, and grilled chicken patty. A lot of the Russian food comes in cans. This is one of my favorites. This is spicy beef and rice.
They make eating a lot more fun. You can turn your spoon upside down, or even let it go, and nothing's gonna fall off.
So another thing that's different when you're up in space is sleeping. Of course, everybody needs good sleep so they don't get too tired out. But without any gravity up there, you can't just have a regular bed like you have at home. You can't flop down on your bed. And another big question that comes up is when do they go to sleep and when do they wake up? The space station goes all the way around the Earth every 90 minutes. So the astronauts see 16 sunrises and 16 sunsets every day. So they can't use that clue to tell their bodies when it's time to rest.
Hi, my name is Ricky Arnold on the International Space Station. We get asked a lot, how do we sleep in space? And it's a great question because we all know how important a good night's sleep is. If you're not getting a good night's sleep, you can count on reduced cognitive function, poorer reaction times, and maybe just being a little grumpy. And up here in space, just like on Earth, those are things we all want to avoid. So, we go around the Earth about every 90 minutes, which means we get 16 sunrises and sunsets a day. So how we sleep is a really good question because the sun's always getting ready to come up or it's getting ready to set. And we use those cues on Earth to let us know when it's time to begin our day and when it's time to end our day.
Ricky is talking about circadian rhythm. It's the body's natural regulator for sleep and wake cycles based on a 24-hour schedule. Those 16 sunrises and sunsets he mentioned can cause circadian misalignment and sleep deficiencies during long-duration spaceflight. The hazards of lost sleep can range from poor attention at school to on-the-job errors to long-term sleep loss, even chronic disease. Sleep is super important. Hey Ricky, what are you doing on the space station to get some sleep?
Well, here in space, we kind of have to do it artificially. So we have these nice crew quarters. It's about the size of a refrigerator. It's very quiet. The space station can be a little noisy, but it's very quiet here. And we can control light with a light switch. If we are just middle of the day, we have our lights, a light like you're seeing right now, which is just kind of standard lighting. It's getting close to the end of the evening. You want to dim the light a little bit, kind of for the end of the evening. Or if you're going to be up late and need to keep awake, we have a really bright light setting. The other thing we have is off. You see how dark it got. Another challenge sleeping on the International Space Station, sleeping in microgravity is really nice because you can just float, stretch out. It's really comfortable. The problem is with the air currents in the International Space Station, you could very well float into a piece of hardware, hit your head, or worse yet, even break something. So we got our sleeping bag here, just almost like a sleeping bag on Earth. But as you can see, we have bungee cords that help hold us up against the wall. So I almost sleep standing up. And also, I do have a pillow. It's just a bag full of clothes. But I actually keep it up on the top of my head because I'm a little tall. In the crew quarters, I tend to hit my head on the ceiling when I'm sleeping. So I got my sleeping bag here. I got my bungee cords to hold me in. And then when it's time to go to bed, it's quite easy. Just unzip the sleeping bag, climb on under the bungee cord, climb into the sleeping bag, make sure you're nice and secure, zip yourself up, plan on getting a good night's sleep so I have good reaction time, my cognitive ability is what it should be, and that I'm not grumpy in the morning. So with that, I'm all set. Good night from the ISS.
So yet another thing, of course, that's a big part of everybody's life is getting some sort of exercise. You probably don't realize that even as you're sitting right now watching this presentation, you're exercising because you're probably sitting upright and your heart has to pump the blood all the way from your feet up to your head, then back to your heart and lungs and so forth. When you're up in gravity, I mean, up where there's no gravity, up in space, then it's very, very easy for your muscles to get weak. Not just like your arm or leg muscles, but even your heart muscles and the muscles that control your breathing and so forth. So they found that astronauts need to exercise at least 2 hours every day to make up for having no gravity most of the time. So I'm going to run another quick video here that shows you their exercise equipment.
name is Joe Acaba, and I'm living and working on the International Space Station as part of Expedition 53. One of the best parts about living on the space station is being able to float. Just like you walk from place to place throughout your day, we float from place to place throughout our day. However, we have learned that the same thing that allows us to float, microgravity, is hard on our bodies over time. Our muscles and bones are made of millions of tiny units called cells, and these cells can have problems in microgravity. Up here on the station, bones and muscles no longer have to support the weight of our bodies, so they get weaker. Astronauts could develop something called muscle atrophy, where our muscles become weak from lack of use. Each bone in your body is made of cells too. A healthy bone has more density than an unhealthy bone. Weakened bones can lead to a disease called osteoporosis. Fortunately, our scientists at NASA have figured out one way to keep astronauts healthy and strong. It's called exercise. Let's take a look at how astronauts exercise in space. This machine here is the Advanced Resistive Exercise Device, or we call it ARED. It simulates free weight exercises in normal gravity to work all of the major muscle groups. ARED's primary goal is to maintain our muscle strength and mass so that we have less of a recovery period when we land back on Earth. All right, so there's looking at lifting. But what about a little cardio? We have a treadmill for that. Let's check it out. Staying physically active helps both astronauts in space and humans on the ground stay healthy. And it prevents muscle atrophy and osteoporosis. Now you can try the activity connected to this video to learn more about muscle and bone cells.
All right. So another thing that astronauts do that they really enjoy, they really train a lot for, is to get outside. You know, they're in this little capsule, even though it's pretty big, but still I think that they love to get outside and go on what they call spacewalks or extravehicular activity. And it's also necessary to go out and do this to change out some of the equipment that's out there, to put out new experiments or fix something that may have gone wrong. Sometimes they have to go out and work on the big solar panels, things like that. But of course, the space station itself has many systems in there to keep them safe. When you go outside, you need to be protected from all these challenges of being out in space. For one thing, with no air or water to modify the temperatures, if you're in the sun, it's 200 degrees Fahrenheit. As soon as you go in the shade, it's minus 200 degrees, depending on whether the sun hits you or whether no sun is hitting you to warm up. As you know, there's nothing to breathe out there, but there's also no air pressure. And if you have all the pressure removed on your body, then your blood is going to want to boil. You know, if you shake a soda can up or bottle and then you pop it open, all those little fizzy bubbles, your blood would do the same thing if all the air pressure around you was suddenly removed. So they have these big pressurized spacesuits. They're weigh about 300 pounds down here on Earth. So even though they don't weigh anything in space, they're still very big and clumsy to move around in. And it takes a lot of training for astronauts to get used to them. Let's watch a little video about spacewalks here.
International Space Station. I'm Ricky Arnold, Expedition 56 flight engineer from NASA. Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics, extravehicular activity, or EVA. Going out on an EVA or a spacewalk has been one of the most amazing experiences of my life. But it's also one of the most complicated and dangerous things we do during human spaceflight. There's a lot of equipment to prepare and maintain, and we do months of training to make each EVA a success. If you think it sounds complicated, you should see all of it in action. Let's start with training and how we get ready for a spacewalk.
Space is an extreme environment that presents many hazards. If we're going to go outside the safety of the ISS, we have to be prepared. That's why EVAs are designed with safety as the utmost priority. We astronauts spend a lot of time in the classroom, just like you are now, learning about the hardware we'll be using and the specific parts of the space station we'll be working on. Then we get to go spend a lot of time training in NASA's giant pool, called the Neutral Buoyancy Lab, or NDL. Since it's impossible to simulate microgravity on Earth, The next best option is water, 6.2 million gallons of it. The NBL is 40 feet deep, 202 feet in length, and 102 feet in width. We get a lot of room to have a full-scale working model of the ISS, which we need for practicing our EVA maneuvers and assigned tasks. We get suited up and weighted so that we're neutrally buoyant in the water, so we don't sink to the bottom and we don't float to the surface. It's a great way to simulate the microgravity we'll be experiencing. We do several dress rehearsals of the EVA before we launch. This gives us the opportunity to prepare for any anomalies that may occur. We spend at least 5 hours practicing the NBL for every 1 hour planned for the spacewalk, so we are very well prepared to execute the EVAs once we are in orbit. Once we are up in orbit, the EVA preparation continues. First, we must perform a pre-breathe protocol to displace the nitrogen in our tissues and help prevent a condition called decompression sickness. During pre-breathe, we breathe 100% pure oxygen and do some light exercise to help purge the nitrogen from our bodies. During pre-breathe, we will also don our extravehicular mobility unit, or EMU. This is a fancy name for a spacesuit. The spacesuit is basically its own spacecraft shaped like a human. There is usually a red stripe on the leg of one astronaut, but not the other, so the ground can tell who is who. To ensure our safety at all times, we are always aware of our safety tethers and where we are in relation to our spacewalking buddy. Hey, buddy. There's a fellow crew member called the IV, the intervehicular crew, on the inside of the airlock, watching and communicating with us as the EVA progresses. We are also prepared for several contingencies should they occur. First, we are trained on the use of a jetpack that can be used to maneuver in the event of an emergency rescue. It's called a SAFER, or Simplified Aid for EVA Rescue.
The view during an EVA is magnificent. It's beautiful out there. It's also extremely dangerous, but our months of preparation and all of those dedicated people working on the ground, working around the clock, ensure we are safe as possible when we work outside the ISS. EVAs have allowed us to build and maintain the ISS, repair mission-critical hardware, investigate malfunctions, install new hardware, and the view, unbelievable. See you next time.
All right. So that's a lot of the main things that people do that are sort of similar to everyday life, but different because they're up in space. But it's important to realize that the reason that people go up there is to do science. The International Space Station is just an amazing science lab. It cost at least $100 billion to build and quite a bit of money to maintain, which is why it's good that we have cooperation of different countries to help out. At any one time, there's something like 250 different investigations running at the same time. Many of them are autonomous. They don't need constant monitoring, but the astronauts who are up there spend most of their days going from one type of investigation to another and doing different types of research. That's really what the space station is about these days. They do a lot of research on the human body and the human mind with the big goal of trying to prepare for longer space flights, as well as learning just about how the human body operates. They do a lot of Earth science, looking back down at the Earth with a lot of different sensors. Of course, they do some space science, studying other galaxies and black holes, gravitational waves, neutrinos, things like that up there. And they do a lot of biology on things like mice from Jackson Lab. They do botany research because they want to be able to grow more food. And they do a lot of material science research, looking at how flames burn and bubbles form and crystals grow and things like that when they're up there in space. All right, so I wanted to leave some time for questions here. I see I'm getting a little short. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and see if you have any specific questions.
Awesome, Jim. That was a really interesting talk. So cool. I think my favorite part was the harness for the treadmill.
Yeah.
If you didn't think walking on a treadmill was hard before. So we do have one question that came in from Garrett. He asks, have we tried to find a way to create some form of artificial gravity aboard the International Space Station to avoid the issues of microgravity?
No, there's no way that anybody has thought of to create artificial gravity. Now we know that if you spin things, then you will tend to be slung out. So you'll see that in some science fiction movies, and for very long flights in the future, it is a possibility to get at least part of a space station spinning enough to create some gravity. But not yet, hasn't been done yet.
Very cool. I was surprised to hear that the International Space Station has been constantly occupied for the last 20 years. I had no idea.
Yeah, many people don't realize that, but I mean, a few people stayed on it for brief periods of time when they were building it, when it was just smaller sections. But NASA's preparing a pretty big celebration coming up. November 2nd will be the 20-year anniversary, constantly having people up there doing all different types of science.
Wow.
Amazing, amazing facility up there.
I really like watching how they eat too. I had never seen a picture of how they actually prepare their food. I'd just seen, sort of the meal ready to eat.
Yeah.
But the way they hydrate it and then warm it up, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, they all have their favorites, and they all really look forward to having a resupply. The ships come up, different companies send things up there every few months. You can imagine if you'd only have fresh fruit or something, vegetables every couple months, it would really seem more special. Although generally they don't complain. They say all that prepared food is pretty good, because NASA has a whole group of people who work on that issue.
Making yummy food for space.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about the fact that, there's only about 50 active astronauts at one time, but something like 40,000 people work for NASA. So
wow.
If you're thinking, if you find space research exciting, you might be an engineer or a biologist or botanist. You might be into food. They need people to design these new spacesuits. They need communication specialists and photographic specialists and so forth. All different types of jobs are available in NASA. Also, of course, there's probes, not just for the astronauts, but there's probes that go to places like Mars and drive rovers around and things like that. All different types of jobs are available.
Really cool. So how would a scientist, if they wanted to become an astronaut, what would they need to do?
About every 2 years, NASA puts out an ad. Anybody can apply. They often get about 8,000 people who apply, and about 1 out of 1,000 is chosen.
Okay.
You need to have a master's degree in a STEM field, a science, technology, engineering, or math. They generally want you to have 2 years of some sort of related experience, although that can be very broad. You might be a doctor, a doctor for people, or have a PhD, or be an engineer. Chris Cassidy is a Navy SEAL, as well as having an engineering degree. There's been 3 people, I think, that are Navy SEALs now that have gone to become astronauts. So anyway, you apply and cross your fingers. Many astronauts are turned down the first time. So one thing they'll tell you is don't give up. Both Chris Cassidy and Jessica Meir were both turned down the first time they applied, but they both are very persistent. So they applied again and they were accepted later on. All depends on what NASA needs at the moment.
Wow, very cool. And definitely something to think about for my future career path. Now I know how to do it. Very cool, Jim. Well, thank you so much for your time. This has been really interesting to learn about. And I was wondering if maybe you had any other final words of advice for our high school audience, anybody that might be interested in getting into this field.
Well, whether you're interested in this field or not, I would encourage you to pursue something you really are interested in. Find something that you're passionate about, and just put your whole life into that. Go, with your whole heart. Don't worry too much about what other people say. Don't take no for an answer. It might not be easy, but you'll find if you pursue something that's very challenging, then you'll also feel like you get a bigger reward when you've conquered that or become successful in something that you found challenging. So find something that you really love and shoot for the stars.
Wonderful. I love that advice. Well, with that, I think we'll close it out for today. Thank you so much for your help, Jim. This was
Well, it's my
wonderful
pleasure.
chat.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you to our audience, and thank you to everybody behind the scenes making it work smoothly.